Welcome, Drink with James, episode 166. We have Casey Goode, aka officially Quigley here. We just went through an amazing hour of going through your career, talking about how you grew, I think 70,000 followers this year. I just looked before the show.
100,000 last year, but yeah,
170,000 in the last 2 years.
Yeah.
You've got one of the highest engagement rates on our platform. Just absolutely killing it. You're also a lovely person and a total weirdo, and you guys you're in for a treat, so thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, James. It's an honor. I'm not gonna lie, I was a little starstruck when I met you.
And that faded very quickly.
Yes.
So,
oh, goodness.
First of all, where are you joining? So, like, I thought you lived in Minnesota, I think.
Really?
I don't know. Maybe I just recently saw you. Were you recently there?
Yeah.
Okay. But you live in LA.
I live in LA.
Very much living in LA.
I've been there for almost 9 years.
Okay. And you're out here at Fashion Week for your first time ever, right?
Yes.
What? Like, that was surprising for me, because like why? Certainly you could, have come out and gone to the shows and gotten a hotel room and all of that before this year.
Yeah. I think I was, and I just did a post about this actually. I think I was fighting a little bit of imposter syndrome. I, started this whole thing out in LA, was a little bit intimidated by the whole New York scene. And as I started to grow my audience, I was asked to some parties here or there, at Fashion Week every once in a while. But I was like, well, I don't want to get out there and, take the time and energy to go out there and then not get invited to anything but a party.
Right.
And I didn't want to be sitting in my hotel room, watching all the huge bloggers that I admire go to all the fashion shows and feeling like a bit of FOMO. And so, I don't know, maybe it was self-preservation. I was trying to protect myself from that feeling. And then something clicked recently where I was like, I don't really think I need to be afraid of that, and I think I'm building it up to be more than it is in my head. And I was trying to identify some of the self-sabotaging thoughts that I had that were making me feel like I didn't belong at Fashion Week, and I think I addressed those with a bit of compassion and tried to flip the script and change the narrative that I do belong here.
Okay.
And so
here
I am.
I think it's a very honest, and again, also kind of surprising because you seem so confident and and just totally fucking out there, and you're totally your own person. And I think that we talked a bit about it before, about that Fashion Week specifically, also just September, this one, which is much more I think a lot less people go in February because the weather's so shit. Being can feel very high school. And it can feel where are you? Are you in row 2 or 3? Are you front row? And are you at the right parties and the right shows? And even, being successful, it can be a hard thing to kind of get over.
Yeah, in my head I was I just don't want to deal with the pressure of all that. And because if I'm so focused, if my focus is so much on trying to impress people, then I'm going to completely forget about what really brings me fulfillment in my work, which is connecting with my audience and serving my audience. And so I just didn't want to distract myself from all of that, by chasing, trying to get into parties and chasing contacts, because it's so much about who you know. And I just felt that would drain me of this precious energy that I have to really do my job in the way that I want to be doing my job.
And how has the audience been reacting to, you did your first show on Sunday, you're kind of here in it, and it's it's a lot because it's hard not to create a lot of content when you're here, right? Because there's just so much going on. It can be a little overbearing for an audience sometimes.
Yeah.
Are they in it and excited and stoked for you, or?
Well, so my approach this time, and I'm kind of glad that I waited to come, because I think I approached it differently now as I would have if I had gone to ones in the past, because of this new strategy that I've been doing, which is writing my captions in advance. So this week I knew that I was going to be crazy with events, with shows, with photo shoots, blah, blah, blah. And so I really wanted to make sure that the content that I was putting out there was still valuable and still made sense for this whole journey. But I knew I wasn't going to have time to write an essay on every post while I was here. And so This past week before I came, I sat out and I said, okay, I want to be really intentional with my fashion week posts. And so I just decided a concept for each day, and I journaled and I wrote out, okay, well, this is what I want to talk about, a little bit about the imposter syndrome stuff. I want to talk about a little bit like not comparing your beginning to someone else's end, because that's also something that I was doing with not wanting to go to Fashion Week. And talking about my experiences in New York and how New York overwhelms me and getting over that. And so a lot of the posts are transformation. It's like the taking people on a journey from like the beginning of one thing to a breakthrough. And so what I did is I wrote out those captions in advance, and I feel like because I did that, I spent less time trying to like scramble and figuring out like what am I going to talk about in this caption, or like where am I going to shoot this and how is this going to make sense. It was just like I know exactly where I'm going because I have to portray this sentiment. So it made the photo shoots easier, more condensed, and then it also made it easier for me to still feel like I'm serving my audience and like connecting with them on a vulnerable and deeper level, even though it's like fashion, you know?
Yeah. And how do you balance, like, I mean, interesting, like writing the captions in advance, and I'm sure they change a little bit when you, when you go to post.
Right.
But so like coming into an experience and being like, well, I know what I want to portray. How do you balance that desire to like control the narrative with being open to like experiencing something and being like, oh shit, that's totally not how I expected it to feel or what I expected this to be like, and maybe it like isn't aligning with that narrative, or like, you know, it's you know what I'm saying, like how
like how do you go, like how do you,
because you're saying like I'm going to do this thing for the first time and I kind of have an idea of the captions I want to write already.
Right.
But by the nature of experiencing something for the first time, it could be different, could be the same than you thought. Like, do you leave, I think just for people who are watching, who are maybe like, that's interesting, maybe I should start experimenting with writing these posts in advance. I guess I'm curious, like, day you go to post, are you leaving like, okay, I have this little run up to this transformation, and then I'm going to try and like compartmentalize and understand everything I went through this week and like put that into the end of this post?
Yeah, I mean, it takes me a while to reflect on things. And so I think that some of those follow-up posts will probably come next week, if that makes sense. So like leading up to it, it was very much like this is how I have been anticipating this. And then as I'm digesting it, and like one of my struggles is really being present in the moment, right? And so it's hard for me to soak everything in and like be there for the people I'm with in the moment and like also be thinking about something else. So I think it's just like, yes, do I plan it in advance? While I'm here, I'm trying to be present, and then maybe on the plane ride home, I'll do the like, hey, this is how I've reflected on this week, and those posts will come next week.
Okay, we're
Does
excited.
that make sense?
It makes total sense. And be that it's your first fashion week, I know you had a buddy here kind of showing you the ropes a little bit, but did you do anything, you know, ahead of it? I think a lot of people, this is a big goal of theirs, right? To be able to come and actually go to the shows and go to some of the parties. Were you reaching out to PR firms beforehand, letting them know you're going to be here? Like, what did you do to kind of like get?
I'm laughing because I didn't prepare as well as I probably could have. I just this last week I did 4 live webinars, and it was like pretty much something that I've been working towards all year, and so my focus was very much on those. I don't know if I was just being naive or just green, but like in my head I was like, oh, people are just gonna invite me to things, and I didn't put as much energy as I probably could have in reaching out to people, and like, you know, in my head I was like, things are just gonna fall into place, which is not a bad attitude to have, and things have been falling into place.
Certainly it's working.
Just wonderfully. But I do think that the people that really prepare and like are very proactive about reaching out to people and building relationships definitely have the most packed schedules.
Yeah. And it's also, I think, a process, right? If this is your first one, you kind of look at it, you see like, oh, I feel like next year I
Could
definitely
do this better.
want to go to whatever Ralph Lauren's doing, because that looks amazing. And so that's a year out. I need to try and build a relationship with that team so they know that, right? And so you can kind of, I think people think they need to come and go to 50 shows and all that, and you can come and do a few things, get the lay of the land.
Right, and just for the people watching, this is my first one, and I'm going to 2 shows. I'm not going to every show. I'm going to 2, and I'm thankful to have that opportunity. And my manager did reach out to some people in advance, and we got no's, cannot accommodate, which hurt for a second.
Yeah.
But then I also realized, this is my first contact I've had with this specific brand or this specific PR agency that's facilitating this. I shouldn't beat up on myself for the fact that they don't, we've never talked before. If maybe I had been posting about, not to throw any names out there, but Zimmerman. I really wanted to go to the Zimmerman show, didn't get invited. But I've never posted about them before. So obviously they want to see some organic support.
And I think it's a nice reminder when you get those no's and you're like, oh, okay, yeah, and you're able to say, I get it. I get why they said no. And maybe if I really do want to do that next year, I need to maybe I'll do it, make sure a couple of things I shoot organically this year are Zimmerman, make sure I reach out to the brand and send them those posts. Right. And then 6 weeks before Fashion Week, reach out and say, hey, I'm coming again.
Exactly.
It's okay if you say no again, but I'm going to just ask once again.
Yeah.
I think people on the brand side, it's really nice to know someone really wants something. And it sucks sometimes you can't accommodate everyone. And I think that if, to our audience, our future audience who will eventually watch this, the brands, a lot of times they really do want to accommodate and just can't, right?
Yeah.
And you're just full, especially now with it being so popular.
Yeah.
That those no's are we say on the sales side of our business, it's no is a soft yes.
Yeah,
It's
I love that.
They said no now.
Means keep asking.
Keep asking. Keep asking.
I like that.
I feel like we jumped right into things, which is fantastic. And you did a podcast with Tim on Foreground, so we will link to that.
Literally my favorite podcast I've ever done. Which was
fantastic. And Tim is raising his hands. He's very happy. But he's in the room, so obviously you'd say that. So that dives pretty deep into your background and how you got here. But let's do the Cliff Notes version, because you do have you have an interesting, unique story of how you ended up here.
Yeah, thank you. I'll try and keep it short. But I grew up in Minnesota wanting to be a pop star. Tried out for American Idol when I was 19, went on season 8, did the show, came back, finished up a degree in journalism from the University of Minnesota, and then was feeling like I was missing music. So I moved out to LA to try and do the thing, be the next Katy Perry. That was what I wanted in my head. Pop star.
That was the path.
Yes. Yeah. And I was pursuing music for a while, and I just felt like I put so much pressure on myself to live up to the name of American Idol. I was I gotta be bigger than Idol.
Yeah.
And that pressure just was eating away at my soul and my creative process, and I fell out of love with the process of making music. And so I turned to a different creative outlet, which was fashion, and just started exploring that around the time when Instagram came out, and just started posting outfit photos, not because I wanted anything from it, but just because I felt like I needed it for my soul, to distract myself from the pressure of the music industry and how discouraged I felt at the time. And it sort of snowballed.
Yeah.
And then it became a thing, and people started paying people to post about things, and I was what is this thing? And here I am.
I'm interested in diving in, I think you seem to be pretty aware of kind of how things are affecting you psychologically, your emotions, spiritually. And a lot of that probably comes from some heartbreak and difficult times and having to get through them. And is not, most people are not willing to say this was my goal in life. This was my whole aim. And I put everything I had into it and got pretty close and then didn't get it. And then have to just brush off
Yeah.
and do it and like try something else.
Yeah.
Just like if you could speak to some of that, because I think, there's this like, I think there's this idea of success sometimes that it's like a zero sum, right? It's a 1 or a 0. Like you get it or you don't. But a lot of times I think that like, the road you're going down, it may not end up where you want it to.
Yeah.
And I think that like everyone having read biographies or watched underdog movies or whatever is like, okay, like, yeah, it's a failure, but like successful people fail and try again. But actually doing living it is is a total nightmare. And isn't something that's really talked about. So like, how hard was it to put down, to like walk away from music? Let's start there.
Yeah, it was extremely hard, and I would be lying if I didn't say my heart is still a little bit broken over that. I think it was something that I knew I needed to do, because if you're in a relationship with your art where you're resentful towards it, like, it's not doing anyone any favors. And you're definitely not, like, that kind of stress creates, bad levels of, cortisol in your brain. And it's like, it's not, that's the opposite of what it takes to be creative.
Yeah.
So it was holding me back. And I knew that I needed to make a change. And at the time when I put music on the back burner, I wasn't saying goodbye to it forever. I was just like, this is going to be a hard pause until I figure out how to get back to that place where it really makes my soul light up. And I feel like I was really able to overcome a little bit of that just because of, and I talked about this with Tim, my relationship with my mom has always been a really driving force for me. And she is in family education. She got her doctorate in education, and she's just growing up. I was always surrounded by psychology books, self-help books, books about the brain and child psychology. It's funny, I saw your post recently it was today, I think, about brains. Somebody on the Fohr card Instagram posted about brains.
Oh, yeah?
And it made me really happy. Because I love brains. And actually, that's the
brains
first...
Brains are important.
That is the first sentence in my online class, is I love brains.
I love
And I make a bunch of zombie jokes.
That's great.
But, so being in that household with my mom, I just always read a lot of self-help books and felt like, okay, this is my time to readdress some of those principles and start living them rather than just preaching them.
Yeah.
And that was really helpful.
So when you walked away from music, did you already have something else working? Because like, I think it's like how if you're in a toxic job and then you find another one, it's like much easier to quit.
Yeah, of course.
Because one, you need to eat, but also just like, it's always easier to like jump to a new thing or leave an old thing if you
have something lined up.
You have something lined up and it's working.
While I was pursuing music, I was working at a bar. So that was how I was making my money. I was not making money as a musician. I was making money as a waitress and as a server, bartender. And then when I was making my music, I needed obviously promotional materials to promote my music. So I would do photo shoots with different photographers, and they were like, oh, this is for the EP cover. The EP that never came out.
Right.
and then I would build those relationships with the photographers, and they really liked shooting me because when I worked with them, I would bring like my mom's clothes from the 80s, and they just like really liked shooting someone who liked fashion. And so I would develop these relationships with the photographers, and because of that, it was, while I was pursuing music, I was posting outfit photos that I had done with other photographers. And so that was sort of like slowly developing on the side, but at the time no one was, like, being an influencer wasn't a job, influencer marketing wasn't a thing. Right. And so I couldn't have anticipated that it would have turned into a career. For me, it was solely a hobby.
But you were like making money doing something, and you had like your art here that you were like pursuing, and then you were basically like, well, this isn't satisfying me anymore. So I still have this thing to make money, but I'm going to now invest my creativity into this thing.
Exactly. And then what I did was I was like, my mom sent me a news article, and the news article was about this blogger who had made $500,000 in 1 year. And she was like, hey, did you know your hobby could be kind of lucrative? And so I was like, this could be a thing. And so that's kind of when the light bulbs went off, and I was like, I'm just going to give myself 1 year and go 100% full force in this direction, music on the side, packed up my studio. And so it was very intentional. It was a choice to like completely pivot.
Yeah. And then, because I think you guys covered a lot of like those early times and growth, I'm interested in, you know, I think you hit like a kind of ceiling at some point, and kind of like thought again about your strategy and what you were doing.
Yeah.
And you seem now to be very strategic.
Yeah.
You know, I've talked to a lot of influencers, and in all honesty, we have less and less people on the show now because most people don't actually have a clear idea about why they're successful, what's working, what's not. They're just like, oh, I just
do
post
it.
and like
Yeah.
people like it.
Oh man.
Which like is frustrating for people who are watching and trying to learn, because it's like, cool. Like,
that's literally okay, well, let's talk about this. Let's break this down. So because I said that I started as a hobby, I started for me, it was literally because I needed to heal my soul. It was very me oriented. And I realized once I started getting some job offers coming through and I was on a roll that, I mean, it doesn't take a rocket scientist, I'm not a business major, but it doesn't take a rocket scientist to understand that like you cannot be running a business without a mission statement. And so I sat back and I thought, well, what is my mission? What is my purpose? And like, what is it that I'm trying to serve? And I realized I had no clue. Like I had this like blanket statement that was, oh, I just want to help women be bold with their style, which is fine. But it wasn't very clear when you saw my content. Like post pops up, it's an outfit photo, says something short in the caption. Like it wasn't very clear why I was doing what I was doing. And I just felt like I needed to really be clear on that. And so when I made the shift from it being all about like chasing things for me and pivoted more towards how do I best serve my audience and what kind of value do I want to bring to this space, that was when I really started having some breakthroughs.
And how do you think about that? Like, okay, so you're writing your posts in advance, and that's something you're doing like consistently? Are you sitting down on like a Sunday being like, what's this week looking like, and actually writing that stuff out? Like, obviously for Fashion Week, different, big moment, you're trying to like figure it out,
well, okay, so part of the caption thing was that I realized that the reason why I was really stuck for a while, around 60K plateaued, like you had mentioned, and I just felt like I couldn't figure out the algorithm, I couldn't grow my account anymore, I just hit a wall, and I was getting really discouraged. And one of the thoughts that I realized was really sabotaging me was I was trying to do the system the way that I saw other people doing the system. And so I was trying to be a fashion blogger in the way that I thought I was supposed to. And one of those things was that bloggers would just post these amazing photos with these short little captions saying like outfit of the day or, you know, beach hair, don't care. And that just didn't feel authentic to me. And so I wasn't really succeeding because I kept trying to be like someone else. Then I started writing my captions in advance, and it sort of got birthed from these journal entries that I had. And I was like, well, this is what I really want to share with my audience. So how can I visually represent this, you know, sentiment? And from there, I realized, well, I just had a lot of aha moments. Then content strategy now is really, because, you know, you can't expect yourself, this is something that I read recently in a book by Kate Northrup. It's called Do Less. I recommend it to anyone. You can't expect yourself to be in a creative harvest at all times. And so she talks about the female cycle and how, like, there are certain times of the month where you're at your peak creative levels hormone-wise. And that was so interesting to me. And so I've actually started now paying really close attention to where I am in my hormone cycle and blocking out the times where I know I'm going to be the most creative.
I mean, there's definitely strategy like best time to post, but being like, I perform best at this part of my hormone cycle is amazing. And I think I'm ready for the Taylor Lorenz article on matching your cycle to your Instagram.
Yes, that is going to happen.
Taylor, if you're watching, like you just started the New York Times yesterday. This is your first big piece, I think.
Yes. Okay, so read some Kate Northrup. So that made me go, whoa, like I expect myself to be creative every day. That I'm just gonna wake up and like an amazing caption's gonna come to me. But like when you're in the flow, take advantage of that time. And so when I know I'm like really fired up or feeling really passionate about something, I just write like 7 captions at a time and I store them, I save them. And then when I go around, my assistant and I sit down usually around the first of every month and we say, okay, what do we want to accomplish this month? You know, which IGTVs are going live, which this are going live, and then, you know, what sponsored stuff's going live. And then we kind of try and make the schedule based on that. And so we'll go back to those. Maybe I'll start a concept like I'll say, oh, I really want to do a post about how I used to wear a hat all the time. And I got over like the insecurity I had about my hair. And so I'll have that idea, but I won't go and write it until like it's the month of and I'm in the flow.
You're feeling it.
Yeah.
Does
that make sense?
No, it does. I mean, I like, I'm not tracking a cycle as I don't have one.
I'm so sorry that this
really
is only
jealous.
applicable
like,
for 50%, but men
honestly,
definitely have hormone fluctuations as well.
That's true. But I definitely will like have topics that I maybe want to write something about. And for me, it's about like so much of the writing process is passive. It's just like letting that idea sit there. And then when I do go to write it or I feel like I can, it comes out quite quickly because you've been like passively thinking about it for a while. And I feel like if you just try and sit down and say like, I'm going to write something right now, it can be really...
Right. And like, I guess maybe since I had experience, like I went to journalism school, writing music, like I kind of have already had those systems in place for how I function as a writer. And so it translated easily to this industry.
And so you're at 60K, you do that. How quickly, like we talk about on the show, like we talk about looking for product market fit, right? Like if you're banging your head against the wall and something's not working, you got to try something else. Because like when you realize something works, you realize pretty quickly like, oh, this is working. So how quickly after you said, I'm not going to be like, be chair, don't care, but I'm going to be like, here's 15 paragraphs about everything going on in my life. How quickly did you see the change?
It was a lot of factors that all added up because it wasn't just the caption thing. It was also the fact that I felt like I was drowning in the comparison game and that I would be on my app and I would be scrolling and I would see all these amazing bloggers and these people doing these crazy things and the crazy outfits and destinations, and I would feel feelings of lack and inadequacy. And I thought to myself, if I'm feeling this way when I'm consuming other people's content, then how is my audience feeling when they come to my page and they see me in this crazy outfit and this crazy destination? And I thought, I don't want to make people feel lack. I want to make people feel hope, and I want to fill them up, and I want to make them feel like this is something that they can relate to and that it's attainable, and I want to obviously inspire people. And so I decided that part of my new strategy was going to be pulling back the curtain to a certain extent and really being vulnerable and transparent. I'm a huge Brene Brown fan.
I don't even know what that is, but yeah.
Well, she does the TED Talk on vulnerability.
Okay.
She's like and so I realized I'm not showing people the whole picture. And so that was another huge thing. It was like, I can't just talk about the great stuff. I don't want to just do the highlight reel. I want to show people my multifaceted self and show all sides of this experience. So part of that was being more transparent, more vulnerable. And the other part was just being brave and saying, okay, I know that if I talk about my insecurities on here, some people might say, oh, she's just doing it for attention, or it's just a marketing ploy to get, whatever, sympathy or whatever. But it also might make one person out there feel a little bit less alone in what they're going through. And I thought, I'm going to cry. If I have the capacity to change just one person with showing up and being brave and courageous and talking about the things that I don't necessarily feel comfortable talking about, then that will be worth it.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that like that passion comes through. I think it was like part of my surprise of you feeling like nervous to come to Fashion Week was like, well, you're putting so much of yourself out there.
Yeah.
I'm surprised you're nervous to do anything.
Well, you know what? I feel like life continues. Sometimes we learn the same lessons over and over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
You know, do you notice that?
Yeah.
Like I feel like I'll learn a lesson and then I'll unlearn it, and then I have to keep learning it.
Yeah.
And that's one of them.
So to go back to how it is a good marketing strategy, did it, like, you were like, I'm going to be more vulnerable, open, I'm going to write more.
Right. You asked, does it happen faster?
Did it work quickly for you?
Part of what you mentioned was trying things out. And I think that that's extremely important. You have to throw a lot of shit at the wall to see what sticks, right? And so in my head, I had so many different interests. I was interested in fashion. I was interested in beauty. I was interested in travel. I liked taking photos with my husband because he's just a hoot and we just have fun in front of the camera together. And so I tried a lot of different ideas. I worked with tons of different photographers. And then last year what happened was, and so I was testing out some of this vulnerability stuff. I was testing out like sharing longer captions. Last year I brought on an assistant, and it was one of the best things I've ever done. But one of the first things that her and I did together is we sat down and we did what I call now a post audit. And we went through, because she wanted to know, like, hey, how can I help you strategize for future content? And I was like, well, obviously I pay attention to what posts do well, but I've never gone and actually made like a chart or like a diagram of what has done well for me in the past. And so we sat down and we just made a list of categories of what the topic was about in the posts and what the subject of the images were. And we just tallied them up. We went through my last year's post at the time and what had done best as far as analytics go. And we found some surprising things.
Like what?
Which completely helped me change my direction. So the biggest surprise was that the number one thing that people wanted to hear about from me, even though I considered myself a fashion and a travel blogger, every single caption that had done well was about relationships, whether it's relationships with other people, relationship with yourself, or relationship to technology. And that blew my mind because I didn't really know. Like, it's why people do the things they do and how people work is my favorite topic.
Yeah.
And I love writing about that, but I didn't realize my audience wanted to know about it. I thought that they were following me for my fashion and for my travel stuff.
Yeah.
Which I hope that they still like that stuff, because that's what I also like doing.
I think the ability to package that all up, right, is like, you'll have a really fun post with a beautiful photo and like interesting clothes and all that, and then you're talking about maybe something else, right?
Yeah.
You're kind of diving into something. And I think that, like, we have been thinking about story a lot here internally and about how important storytelling is, especially as you start to talk about sponsored posts, right? Because you have to tell a bigger story about why this brand is interesting and why, and even to your point about Fashion Week, it's like, my problem with Fashion Week for influencers is that it's not interesting for the audience because you see it so much. And so you're reframing it, not as I'm going to Fashion Week, but as I am confronting fears and insecurities about myself and trying to overcome them at the same time living an experience that I've been really excited about. Now feels like, as an audience member, I am on a different kind of journey where I'm not just watching you go to shows, but I'm watching you overcome these things and like live out this dream, and that's like a lot more exciting.
Thank you.
And I think you just do it, you do it very naturally, and in a way that maybe could be intimidating. And as you were talking, it was like a barrier for some people, I think, can be like, you can't write about like a relationship with yourself if you can't understand yourself. And it seems like you've been like, your whole life is kind of led up to you having a good amount of self-awareness through your upbringing and everything, like what you've been through. Do you get people reaching out being like, how did you get to this point that is maybe more enlightened than some people?
Well, 100%. Like, yes, on Instagram a lot, but they usually don't phrase it in like, how did you become more self-aware? they usually phrase it in, how did you become as successful as you are in XYZ? But I know that the real question is, how did you become more self-aware? Does that make sense? So that's why I created the class that I created, because I realized that a lot of people don't know the right question that they want to ask about how to become successful. And so much of it is your relationship with yourself.
Yeah. And so what is the class? You just did the 5 live webinars.
Yep.
What was the idea there?
So I created an online class, and then I did the webinars as sort of like an opt-in appetizer type thing. And the class is 3 parts. One of them is self-care and your relationship with yourself. The other one is more of how to get people to like you, like how to network, how to be in the industry. And then the third is just like straight influencer business stuff. Because I just felt like you really needed to master the first 2 before you moved on to the third. And people always jump to this one. Like, how do I get brands to work with me? It's like, you've got to figure your shit out first in other areas.
Yeah. Maybe like get a following.
Yeah.
First,
like maybe figure out why you want to do this.
Yeah. And the response to that has been great, I assume.
It's been really lovely.
Yeah.
We did like something live in person. I think that was my favorite thing, just because so much of it is talking to people digitally. So to actually like hug people and like look in their eyes and see how it has affected them was the most fulfilling thing I've ever done, I think.
And that's that's a big thing to put yourself out there in again, public way and say, hey, I assume you're charging people for these classes?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, the workshops were free.
Yeah.
But yeah.
But you're saying like, not only do I think I know a thing or two about this, enough to teach it to you, but now I'm going to charge you for it. Did you struggle with that decision? Did any of those feelings of like imposter syndrome, things like that come up when you were building
so
that
many
class?
meltdowns. Okay, wait. So here's something funny. So last January was when I wrote the class, and I knew like 4 months I had known I wanted to make an online class, but I knew that like other stuff was going to get in the way. So I had to take a full month off of work. I actually said no to every single job for a full month so that I could write the class. And like as I got closer and closer and closer to filming the fear became more and more and more and more real. And it's always the strongest before you're about to break through. And I definitely had moments where I literally laid down on my laptop and cried, and I was like, I can't even practice this stuff. How am I going to preach this if I like can't even get through it? But that's the most beautiful thing, is that when I had those breakdowns and I cried and questioned whether or not I was an expert, whether or not I knew what I was talking about, whether or not the information I was talking about was even valuable to people, and then I overcame that, then I could go back and write about how I overcame it and what was going on in here to help me process that.
And was that, it's such a different product than creating a post on Instagram, right? Like spending a month writing something, filming, it was probably months long to launch this thing.
It was.
And you're kind of used to that, right? You made music. That's not a fast process oftentimes, especially if you're putting an album together. So, do you feel like your background in music and enabled you to kind of take a longer view of what you're doing and not think just like, in the next month, I need to gain more followers, I need to do this, I need to be paid to go to, Italy, or I'm a failure?
Yeah, well, I think with music and with this industry, there's no guarantee for how long your success is going to last, and you just don't know what's next. So I think for me, I'm always thinking about, how am I going to sustain this type of thing, and what am I going to grow it into? And I'm a very future-oriented person. I'm a 7 on the Enneagram scale or test.
You speak a language, I don't even know what the hell you're talking about.
Yes, you do. You don't know what an Enneagram is?
No, I have no idea.
Google it.
He's not that bit of a culture.
I'm not in that.
Whatever, I thought you were a psychology person.
No, I just understand humans because they're very simple.
Okay. Okay, well, I'm going to make you take the Enneagram test later. I think you're a 1.
Yeah,
okay.
Is that like sociopath?
Yes. Borderline psychotic.
Okay. Good.
So I'm very like head in the clouds, dreaming of what's next. So, yeah, in my head, I was like, I know I can do this influencer thing and make money doing this now, but what do I want when, 10 years later? And how am I going to build this into something else? And, for so long I'm being paid to post about other people's brands, but how am I going to develop my own brand? What are my own products going to be? And those were questions that I had sat with for a little bit. And finally, I just realized your product becomes that one thing that everyone's asking you about. And that one thing that everyone was DMing me saying, like, how'd you do this? How'd you do that? Was how did you build your following so fast? And how did you get such great engagement? And so I decided to answer that.
Yeah.
question.
I mean, and that is like, I talk about product market fit on the show, and it's like very much a startup term. It's not in the influencer space.
I don't even know that term.
Yeah. See, we're talking, we're teaching each other.
Thank you.
And product market fit is that it's like when you're building a business, you want to make sure that like the market wants what you're selling, right? And a lot of time the way you know that you have it is like people reaching out to you, asking, hey, can we get more features? Can we get this? Can we get this? How did you do this? I'm so, and a lot of kind of early influencers will ask, like, how did you know when you started charging? Like, how did you know when to start charging? It's like, oh, people started paying me. Like, and I do think that like in the influencer space, it gets lost that you need to be influencing people in some way. You need to be in some way an expert or influential, or, we talk about like entertaining, inspiring, or educating people. Like the posts need to do that. If they don't, they're worthless. But if you're doing that, people are going to be reaching out, asking you questions, right? Like they're going to be wondering how you did something. How did you, how many times is Tessa getting questions about how she shot that photo and how did she edit her thing? Like, how did you edit that? And then she made an app to charge people to do that, to answer that question. And it's a magic thing when you find product market fit, because you're like, oh shit, like this is great, right? And it builds the confidence because you're like, I'm putting something into the world that people are just valuable. Like, give me more, and they're willing to pay for it, which is great. You do more galleries than anyone on earth.
I do.
You love galleries.
I do.
Carousels.
Which my assistant and I call carousels. Carousels?
Okay.
Carousels? Which one is it?
Carousel, I think. I don't know.
I always mess it up.
Right. And you'll do like a few posts and then often a behind the scenes video, or you'll do like a photo of you like in your sweatpants being like, so like why do you do them? Why not? Because like traditionally they don't seem to do as well, but obviously with you they do great.
I don't know what happened, but somebody told me once, and they could have just pulled this out of their butt. I have no idea, not backed up in fact at all. But someone was like, the longer somebody looks at your post, the better. Like the longer that if someone's scrolling and they stop and look at your post, whether it's to scroll through the carousel or to read the caption, like that's good for the algorithm. Don't know who told me that. Thank you, that person, wherever you are, because it made me start thinking, how do I get people to stay on my content for longer?
Yeah.
So I'm not sure if it actually factors into the algorithm, no clue. But I do know that when I started thinking about how to get people to stay, that was transformational. So in my head, I'm just like, the longer someone's consuming my content, the better.
Yeah. And what has worked there, right? Because there is always the like, I did a shoot and I have a lot more photos than I can share in this one post. And so there's some of that, right? Like, I just love these 4 photos.
I want to show them all.
But do you now have a strategy of like what makes a like compelling carousel?
Yeah. You mentioned it. You can just post a lot from the look and give people, detail shots, full body, yada, yada, if you're fashion oriented. Or you can show a behind the scenes. That's very fun for people to see how you made the final shot, whether it's through how you edited it, how you drew the picture. Sometimes it's like this glamorous shot and then you pull back and you see that it was shot in front of a gas station. People really like to see that. People really like to see posing, like how you capture the motion of a shot. I also like to use carousels to show before and afters. Like, this is the before I styled the outfit in my closet and I wasn't wearing any makeup, and then this is how it looked on the day of. Or this is the before the haircut and this is the after. Like, that's why people love makeover shows like Queer Eye and HGTV so much, is because you could see that transformation. You can do that with like the 10-year challenge. That's why people went crazy for that.
Yep. And so like when you're going out to shoot, are you thinking like in terms of what's in, like, how am I gonna
show a transformation?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And like you're totally right. Like change is like the most exciting thing in the world for humans in general, and I think it's like such a sticky thing. And just, I mean, obviously I swipe on your carousel, so like it works, but the like amazing photos, and then again, you in your sweatpants, like, you know, eating ice cream or something. Like it's just like.
Well, I also, that was another thing. I started a hashtag, which is IG versus real me. And it's just, you know, the curated photo and then swipe to see how I literally look in this exact moment when I'm posting it.
Yeah.
I just snap a unfiltered selfie and go, yo, I'm on my couch.
And like often people's like IG versus real life photos are like frustrating because they're like, you know, it's just them like sitting on their light-filled couch with their like Hermes blanket being like, oh my gosh, I have no makeup on. It's like, that doesn't like look that much different. So yeah, I love what you're doing there.
Thank you.
I want to talk about posing because like I used to shoot, and I think one of the reasons I knew I wasn't like destined to be a photographer was that I had no understanding of posing, and I had such a hard time directing people on what to do. You do like really, I don't know, like it's not loud poses, but they're poses. You know, you are like not just like I'm taking a photo in the moment. They're great, but like I think a lot of people, I'm sure, ask you about it.
Yeah.
You know, it's similar to Teza, but she was a model, so it like makes sense that she like spent a lot of time modeling and getting posed and understands that. How did you figure all that out?
I was a model too. Well, I actually did a little bit of modeling when I was younger. But I think through experience, but then also through looking back on the photos that I thought did really well. When I first started, I was timid and, you know, it was scary, and I wore sunglasses and I didn't look at the camera, and I thought that if you were high fashion, you were so serious.
Yeah.
And part of that transformation was me going, that's not the kind of person I think I am. That's not the kind of energy I want to put out. I want to be connected. And so I started my posing is always eye contact.
Yep.
And I want to smile. I want to make people smile. So obviously I should be conveying the kind of emotion I want to make people feel. And so I had to reflect on that and make that transition. And then as far as body movement goes, I was very closed off and I wasn't like open. And I read this book by Amy Cuddy called Presence. And so much of her philosophies and what she's studied in the psychology world is how your body language changes the physiology of your brain.
Yep.
And so for me, it was deciding that it wasn't going to be like the turned away shots where I wasn't looking at the camera. It was like full on like superwoman poses. And it was, you know, trying to reflect that with my body versus not just with my brain.
Yeah. I mean, that don't make sense.
So it's led from psychology and then it goes into practice. You know what I mean?
And then like, did you do anything? Again, like they're really active poses. I guess that's how I describe it. Like, are you just out there like, it's a little embarrassing to do that in public for a lot of people.
It took time to develop like being comfortable just like hopping in photos. Like I like skipping, I like tossing a leg up, I like twirling around. I love motion.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's so weird doing that in public. But the more you do it, the less embarrassed you feel about it.
And then I think also like once it works, you start being like, oh,
I like this.
Okay, I'm less like concerned about looking silly.
Yeah, and I also just I like shapes. So I like to make weird shapes, like back bends and like, I don't know, I always think of things in terms of symmetry and like.
And are you planning the photos as much as the captions? Are you thinking through, you know, exactly your vision for the shoot? I mean, I saw the one you did recently, you know, where you had someone like holding you and obviously that one took some planning. but generally, is it more like, let's go shoot and see what we can see? Or are you like, I have an exact vision of what I want?
It's a mix of both. Mostly, if it's a for fun shoot, it's sometimes just like we show up and we shoot whatever we can in the neighborhood, and I just bring outfits. Sometimes it will be for fun shoot where it's like an actual collaboration with a photographer. So we plan in advance. We make a mood board. We say this is what we want to get out of this, and we brainstorm a lot in advance, and it's very intentional. And then other times, and this is generally how it is, it's we have to shoot 5 things in a day. 3 of them are sponsored posts. We have to abide by this brief, and this brief. So we think about those and are very intentional about those. And then we have time for 2 more looks. And those looks, we go, okay, we look back into like the catalog of the journals that I've written, and we say, how can we portray this? How can we portray this concept? And how do we get the shot? So I like to be as prepared as possible, because then you're just not wasting time looking around for things.
Yeah.
Like for a while, I was thinking about doing a photo where I posed with a stop sign. Instead of saying stop, I amended it with like a sign to say start. And I wrote that caption in advance, and it was so easy then on the day of to be like, okay, all we have to do is find the stop sign, you know?
Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah.
I think we're probably running low on time, so I will just say, I know you answer this question all the time, but answer it again, which is just like, what do you, what is the thing, like, for everyone watching that isn't yet experiencing the, like, success specifically on these platforms that they want? Like, what is the thing that they should do to try and find that? Try and find their, thing that works for them, that will eventually,
Shift back to giving. Just figure out how you can give more of what you know to people. I know it's just so easy in this industry to get caught up in the me situation. Just figure out what you have to teach, and just teach people, and focus on that, and focus on building up your set of skills and your tools, so that you can then teach people about those specific things that you're an expert on.
I would be impossible to say it better. So thank you so much. You guys all probably follow her, but if you don't, we've got links. We've got a link to her podcast episode with Tim as well. So if you sat through an hour of this and you said, you know what, I need more, well, today is your lucky day, because you can have it.